Okay, so this talk is about accessibility equals responsibility. We were initially going to do this in French, but to keep things easy for us, we decided to do it in English. You can find the slides on this URL if you want to take a picture of it. You can see the slides later. I'll also show this slide at the end of the presentation so that you can take a picture then. So if you don't want to do it right now, no problem. Okay, so we are from Evolving Web. We are like a web agency located in Montreal. Our office is in Old Montreal. We are a team of around 10 Drupalers, and we do most of our projects in Drupal, so we are Drupal specialists. We do training sessions in Drupal, like on a variety of subjects, like basics and advanced. And we contribute to the Drupal community by helping with Drupal camps and by contributing patches and modules. So that's Evolving Web. You can learn more about us at evolvingweb.ca. And these are some of our clients, like Princeton University Press, then the Western Digital, and Tourisme Québec, McGill University as well. Okay, and this, as for me, I am Jigar. People also call me Jerry. I'm a full stack developer at Evolving Web. It's been almost 2 years I'm working there. I started working with PHP back in 2008, and I started working with Drupal in 2013. Drupal 7 was my first version. I'm learning Python and Ruby. I did business administration course, specialized in marketing. I ran my own web shop for 3 years in Calcutta, India, but then I had to immigrate, so I had to shut it down and move. I think something is going wrong, right? It's flickering, right? So maybe I shouldn't shake my leg. Okay, so yeah, and I speak a bunch of languages, and I'm learning 2 more, and I can solve the Rubik's Cube. That's me. Okay, so Meyci.
Okay, my name is Meyci. I don't have a nickname. I'm sorry. I'm a marketing and content manager, and I was born and raised in Istanbul, and then I lived in Israel. I know it's a weird combination. And I have a BA in business administration, and I have 4 years experience in e-commerce, and unfortunately I speak 4 languages, so Jigar beats me at this subject. So we will talk about accessibility. Nowadays, everybody is speaking about accessibility. Oh my God, I need to make my website accessible. What I will do? Wow. We know what is in reality. We know what is it. So, what is accessibility? Accessibility is to all practices of removing all barriers that prevent interaction with or access to a website by people with disabilities. So why we need accessibility? First of all, it's a good thing to do something for people, like by morality. You feel good when you do good things for people. After, it's corporate social responsibility, and it gives reputation to your website. So, oh, this website is accessible, and you go to this website and you check how they made it. And then by law, it's you need to make it. For example, now we have a project, governmental project, and we need to apply accessibility requirements by Quebec government. And also, it's a complement for SEO. When you apply to your website accessibility requirements, you have better ranking in Google. And also, if you apply again accessibility requirements, it gives your website better usability, and you can expand your market. So, who needs accessibility? First of all, people who has visual impaired people, and auditory impaired people, people who cannot hear very well, and people who have physical disabilities, and also people who have intellectual disabilities, like people who have dyslexia in this case. If I want to, I can give an example. But also people without disabilities need accessibility, like aged people who can see very well, and people who can read very well, and also people who are learning new languages, people who have slow connection internet, people who has old browsers, and also people who are using mobile phones, like they need responsive design. So these are the people who need accessibility also.
And one more, like there are people who are like new to your website. Maybe they're visiting your site for the first time, so it will be hard for them if you have an unstandard way of like things, like if your menu just shows up in a weird place, and you have a weird pop-up that blocks everything. They don't know what to do. So there are some sites where you can't figure out what to do, like you're there, but what do I do next? So for frequent visitors, it's a good thing, but for new visitors, you need to keep in mind that if things are standard, like there's a hamburger menu on the top left or the top right, then you can expect that they know what to do. So new and infrequent users also need accessibility.
So how you can make your website accessible? So you need to follow that content accessibility guideline, which are your website should be perceivable, which means that your content can't be invisible to all of your senses. Like you need to see the content, you need to hear the content, and you need to touch to the content.
Yeah. So if you can't see the content, and if you can't hear it at the same time, you just can't do anything with the content. So either you hear it or you see it. So there must be one way to perceive the content. So perceivable.
Your content should be operable. For example, you have physical disabilities and you can use your mouse. So how you will perform with this website? So you need to use your keyword to navigate, so your website should be operable for them. And also your website should be understandable. For example, you build a website for 6th grade physics, but you cannot put on this website string theory content. It will be so confusing for them, they won't understanding, and your content should be user-friendly and everybody should understand it. And last principle, your website should be robust, which means like as technology advances, your website should be compatible with them. It should work with mobile devices, it should work with browsers, it should work with assistive technologies. Mm-hmm. So how we can implement accessibility to website? First of all, you need to do a planning. If you need additional human resources, you need to provide it. If you need to do additional investment, you need to get ready for that.
And you need to incorporate it in your timeline. Like the project is going to take 3 weeks, accessibility is going to take like 3 to 4 days additional. So you need to have that elbow room and everything planned so that you can put in the proper efforts.
You need to understand your audiences. So who are these people with disabilities? They are using your website. So according to this, you need to choose your accessibility level that I will talk later. And then according to website content accessibility guideline, you need to prepare checklists. You can find this checklist in guidelines website. And you need to get the team ready, which means your designer should make you accessible design. She needs to give you accessible colors. She needs to provide you accessible contrast on the website. Your development team should implement accessible solutions, which means their JavaScript should work with keyboard, for example. And the content team should provide you accessible content, which means their content should be understandable by everybody. And if they provide links in the content, it's supposed to be accessible for everybody. So, and then if we pass the testing phase, you can do, once you understand your audience, you did all your plans, and your team gave you accessible website, so how we can test it? First of all, you can make manual testing with your keyboard. For example, you can use automated testing tools. We use Siteimprove for that, which is very good tool. And you need to use assistive testing tools like screen readers. And if you have some problems, and again, you need to restart and you need to fix the problem, and your website you can make your website accessible like that. So if we turn back how to choose a level of accessibility, according to guidelines, again, we have 3 levels of accessibility, which is level A. And without level A, for some people, it is impossible to use your website. Like, it is the minimum you can do, and most of websites, they are following this rule, but still, if you have level A, it's not enough for people with disabilities. Usually, we recommend the AA level, but it's general level. If your website reaches AA level, it means it's quite accessible, but still it will be difficult for some user to access to your website. And level A, it's very strict. It's mainly for sites for people with disabilities. And if you reach level A, level AAA, your website will be fully
very highly accessible. Yeah.
So I give the lead to my colleague Jigar, and he will speak about implementation of accessibility.
Yeah, thank you, Meyci. So, like Meyci mentioned, like all the 3 phases, like planning and execution and evaluation. So I'll just go into some more details, keeping the clock right in front of me. The first step in implementation of accessibility is like the design part. So if it's like building blocks, if you get the first block wrong, then if you put more blocks up there, you cannot build a tree. So every project usually starts with a design phase where the designer makes a bunch of designs. So he or she should keep in mind that the first thing, which I really didn't used to mind much when I was younger, but these days I have glasses, which I'm not wearing right now, so I find font sizes below 14px to be a little hard to read. So if you see I think you can read it well because it's projected in a big screen, but it's quite small. So it's better to have a legible font size, at least 14 pixels in my opinion. And you could do some testing to make sure the font is legible. And then secondly, you should try using web-friendly fonts. Like Google fonts have a bunch of good options, or at least use sans serif fonts, which are good for screens. Don't use squiggly handwriting fonts, except for some places for decorative things. Don't use Comic Sans. And then avoid too many font variations, because sometimes designers, especially the young designers who are very new to this kind of thing, they would be really they would want to show everything they can do, so they would put in a bunch of fonts heading is this, subheading is this, so it gets really hard to do the coding, and all those fonts mean that you're loading TTF or some EOT files, and then the web page loads slowly, and then Google starts complaining your page speed is not very high. and things like that. So we should keep that in mind. Like less fonts, the better, make it legible, keep it simple. The second thing is like the designer needs to keep in mind the contrast. So the higher the contrast, the better. There are tools available to like calculate contrast. Like for example, this contrast calculation that I've done, 13.25, is the Quebec flag, white and the blue. So it's quite accessible. Whoever designed it had high contrast in mind. So for level AAA, I think you need a contrast level of 7.5 or something. So this is way beyond that. So it's amazing. So keep contrast in mind. And then keyboard navigability. Like back in 2007, I had a Windows computer where my mouse, like we used to have ball mouses, like I had one back in those days. So the ball had some problem, and then I tried to clean it and it broke. So I didn't have enough time, so it took me 7 days to like get a new mouse. And in those 7 days, I used to navigate only using keyboard. So like file menu, Alt F, and then E, and things like that. So I learned a bunch of shortcuts which still work on the new MS Office versions, but they just don't say that they are supported. Like Alto and N takes you to the bullets and numbering screen and things like that. So your site should have a nice like navigability. You could be typing tab as soon as you land on your page. You can go to the like hamburger menu, and if you click on it, then you should automatically be focused on the first link in the hamburger menu, and so on. So it should be accessible. There shouldn't be excessive amount of tabbing involved. And most importantly, there should be a link to the main content, which will ensure that the users can skip all the navigation tabbing and jump to the main like content. So this is one more important thing. And this thing is very important here. So ensure proper flow of content. Like when you write something down on a piece of paper, you plan things in your mind, and then you put like a heading, like provinces of Canada, and then you say like Quebec and this and that. And then you have, like, if you want to discuss cities, you put them logically under those subheadings. So for a website as well, like, you should keep that in mind, and you should try to structure your content nicely so that things go, like, people can read and understand exactly what's going on. So proper order of headings is very important. I'll repeat that thing a couple of times in the later slides as well, so it's really important. And keep in mind that the designs will ultimately be implemented with CSS and HTML. So don't make something which you can only make in Photoshop, and like the HTML CSS guy just bangs his head over the keyboard while he's trying to implement it and maybe quits his job. So make sure your design is implementable, and keep screen readers in mind, because like I say, keep in mind that someone might be listening to what you're writing. So screen readers will be reading the thing, so you should keep that in mind to make sure everything is being read properly. If you want to ignore something, use something like ARIA hidden or something to make sure it's not in the reader. The reader doesn't read it. So and these are some other things to keep in mind for which I couldn't find an image, so I just listed them on one page. So keep screen readers in mind, I just repeated. Then indicate element states properly. For example, if you're on a form and you're tabbing through the form, then you should be able to see the focused input element properly so that you know exactly where you're typing. And then, for example, if it's a button and you tabbed to that button, then the button should be like changing color or something so that you know exactly where your focus is on. And include a text version of your site. There are many sites, like if you have filed Canadian taxes, you know, the CRA site has text versions of various laws. So you should consider having something like that on your site so that people don't have to see HTML at all and go to the text version if required. And include a high contrast version of your site if you're expecting people with visibility problems. I don't know. people who have problems seeing will be visiting your site. So you can I usually use this high contrast mode at night so that the screen doesn't glare. And Docker has a nice button on the sidebar which you can turn on night mode, which I really love. So then if you expect your users to print your web pages, then make sure you have a print-friendly CSS file so that the things look good on paper as well. And lastly, but this is a really important point, like I mentioned, young designers would have the tendency of changing so many things between pages that you would think this page and this page, are they on the same website? So I had once a site on one page they would have a heading and a breadcrumb. On the other page you would go you will see only the heading, no breadcrumb. And there will be pages where there's only breadcrumb, no heading. So I'm like, oh my God, but the design's been approved, so I'll have to do it. But keep that in mind, it's not a good thing to do. So the next thing is development. And as devs, we have a lot of responsibility in A11y implementation. So the first thing is HTML and CSS. Make sure you know your code and you write valid markup and valid CSS. For example, don't put block elements inside inline elements, and make sure H1 comes first, H2 comes second, and things like that. Then keep the code to text ratio in mind. Don't write 5 lines for something which can be done with 1 line. Then choose your HTML elements logically. We'll discuss this in a little more detail in a few slides. So it basically means if it's a button, try to use the button tag. If it's a link, try to use a link tag. Don't create a span with a class button or link and then use JavaScript to track it and do things. Just keep it simple. So then ARIA role, use ARIA role wisely. So if you have used jQuery UI, you see there are weird little attributes that jQuery UI adds to various elements. If you set the button plugin on an anchor tag, you see ARIA role equals button. So those things are actually telling the browser that this thing, even though it's an anchor tag, it's supposed to be acting like a button. So there are various little ARIA roles like that, like navigation and things like that. So read about them and use them wisely and see what they do. Then avoid absolute positioning. That's something which I really hate to do, but when I have to do it, I feel sad. So absolute positioning is weird. It's good for small pop-ups. It's okay, but if you want to place something really in a weird place, it's it's not it's not proper flow of content, as we discussed a few slides ago. Try to avoid it as far as possible. Then use efficient solutions. So yeah, this guy has a nice solution. He wrote a JavaScript file which can do a banner, which is very nice, but is the solution actually efficient? So there are many libraries which are really tested for years and are out there. Swiper is one such library, if I remember correctly, and Slick as well. So there are things for which you should be using a library, and try to use the most efficient solution so that you end up with something which is nice, something which is not homegrown. And then know your elements correctly. So use OL and UL, this is what I was talking about. So use logical elements, ensure proper heading order, like I mentioned before. Then use there are new HTML5 elements, sections, article, nav, which is for wrapping a navigation. And in a screen reader, you get some audio main navigation. Click tab with 6 links, and then you can tab through it and you can listen. So those tags actually have meaning. Then header and footer, it's not only for the entire page. You can have a header for an article, footer for an article. So study about them and use them properly. Then main, which is demarcates the main content of a page, and aside is for complementary content for the main content. Then use div elements for design related things which you just don't have any content-specific meaning, but it's just for formatting and structuring your code. Then avoid deprecated HTML elements, like don't use font tags because nobody uses them anymore, they're ancient. Then keep best practices in mind, like make sure you're implementing a nice solution which doesn't stink. So then next is surfs up. So allow jumping to the main content, like Drupal already has a link like that for screen readers. You can just tab to that link, then press enter, you go to the main content, then you can tab through the main content. So this is something very nice to have. Then ensure proper tab order, that's what I said. Keep the navigation simple, like don't have 3 or 4 levels deep, like drop-down menus. Nobody uses them anymore. So if it's 2 levels deep, it's acceptable. Try to simplify and structure your content nicely so that you don't end up with like endless hierarchical menus. Then have meaningful link text. So don't have links like read more or click here. Or even there are people who do only here, like don't even put an anchor on the click. So when you do it like on a screen reader, it sounds really strange, like what is this here about? So try to put meaningful text like click here to read about Drupal Camp Montreal or things like that, which makes more sense on a screen reader. Then I think it also gives you additional SEO points. So sections. Organize your content nicely into sections. There are special sections like header and footer, which have special meaning, article as well, nav. And each section is supposed to have a unique label. You can do it using aria-label or aria-labeled by. So to add labels to those sections, and then on screen readers, people can just like jump from one section to another, and they can listen like they'll get messages like you are on this section, and then you can press enter or something, and then you can read what goes on inside. So it's a good thing to have. Then all content should belong to some section. This is like a good thing to do, so you should try to keep all content in some section at least. Then images and figures. So avoid having text inside images. So if you ever have to do it for some reason, just see if you can like put the image as a background and have the text floating above it somehow. And include alt tags, alt attributes for things like logos, or better yet, like do it with CSS. Have only like a piece of text in a span saying ID logo, and use CSS to insert like the background image of the logo, and hide the text. Then empty, like there are people who would add alt to everything because they just heard that alt attributes are really important. So there are sites where you like use a screen reader or something, and then you listen to like a bottom right corner, blue color background and things like that, because they have like some kind of a background going on, they have a blue corner, and they added an alt attribute for that. So we don't need alt for that, so make sure you like keep the alt attribute empty for images which are purely for decorative reasons on your page. And then don't use alt attributes for keyword stuffing. I have a friend, I built a blog for her, and she uses alt only for like keyword stuffing. So you should not do that. Try to describe the image so that the alt is actually useful to somebody using a screen reader. And then ensure caption for figure elements. Like in HTML5, there's a figure element, and if you add a caption inside it, which I think Drupal does when you insert an image inside a WYSIWYG editor, so it's a good thing to have those things. And then provide title. Okay, for audio and video, like I'll just go through this a little faster. So for audio and video, provide titles and descriptions. I've heard that for iframe elements, you're always supposed to have a title so that you can explain what's going on inside the iframe. Then you can read more about these things on the WCAG like guidelines for accessibility. And then use accessible media players or the HTML5 elements for audio and video display. Then use specialized third-party services when possible, because YouTube spent a bunch of hours building their like video player, which you will never be able to do. So if you embed their video player, then it will obviously be more accessible than something you can make on a weekend. So tabular data. For tables, try to provide a caption so that people using a screen reader or even looking at the table can know exactly what's going on inside the table. Like a report, financial report, like profit and loss for the year 2017-18 or something like that, which is very helpful. Or alternatively, you can use the aria-describe by attribute to point to another element which contains a caption for the table. Then don't use tables for structuring pages because this is no longer the 90s. Use divs, use floats, and keep it simple. Then use floating row and column headers for big tables, like if you have a table with 100 rows and you're scrolling down, like which I think is missing on the Drupal Camp Montreal site. You go down on the page and you don't know which room the top belongs to. So try to add floating headers. So it will be really good for your users. Then JavaScript, people, there are different thoughts for this, but I believe you should include graceful degradation, and whenever your site actually must require the site user to have JavaScript enabled, include a no script tag or something to tell them that you need to have JavaScript enabled in order to use this feature. Then try to use open source plugins where possible, because they have done a lot of research on what they're building. They have spent years, and many people have tested, and there's community tested. So open source plugins are very nice for this. Then use plugins which respect accessibility. Sometimes you will find some plugins which don't respect accessibility rules so much. So just go through those things nicely and do your research before you include a particular plugin on your page. Then avoid trapping the user into workflows. Like for example, you click on a link, then you're on a dialog, and then the user has nowhere to go. So either they have to refresh the page, or there are sites, okay, this is a better example. You go to some particular page, I don't remember the name, and wayfair.ca, okay. So you go there, and then you have a subscription dialog, and even if you want to see their product catalog, you cannot see anything because you have to enter your email and give them permission to send you newsletters before you can see anything. So I just did info@theirsitename.com and got in. So try to avoid those things, it's not good. And then write browser agnostic syntax. Don't write something which only works on Chrome or only works on Firefox. Keep the bigger picture in mind. Use jQuery because it has that kind of a thing built in. Then metadata, the power of the invisible. Metadata is not visible, but it is very important. So try to add, pay attention to the hreflang attributes and other language-related attributes which are there in the head and body. Is it on the body? Yeah, I think it's on the body. Then direction of the text, like LTR or R2L or RTL. Keep those small things in mind, which are really good. And then include the right attributes for the right elements. Like for example, we discussed image must have an alt attribute. Then there are other elements which require certain attributes, like sections need to have a aria labeled or aria label or aria labeled by, and things like that. So keep that in mind. Okay, so this is the last phase of implementation, which is the content writer's role in accessibility implementation. So you built a really nice website, the site goes live, the editor adds some schlanga to the site, which makes it break. So what should the content writers be aware of so that they don't break your site? So firstly, you should try to from a content point of view, you should have an accessibility help page where you can list things like I cannot see properly, what should I do? I cannot listen on a well, so what could I do? And things like that. Like if you go to bbc.com, I think they have a very nice accessibility help page. Then know your WYSIWYG editor. Like the same friend I mentioned who does keyword stuffing in their alt tags. So I gave her a very nice version of CK editor, and I explained all the tools over 2 hours. But then I see her site after a few months, and I see she uses asterisk for making bullet lists and dashes. There are many people who do that in Gmail as well. And I'm like, okay, do Control-Shift-8 and it will make it a bullet list. So know your tools which are there in the WYSIWYG editor, which are really helpful, and structure your content properly. Don't use bold text for a heading. There's actually a heading tag which does that. So select heading 2 or heading 3 or whatever, so which will make things much better. Then include a sitemap. Sitemap page would be a very good thing to have. People can go there with a screen reader and they can listen to everything that's there. Or if your site is really complex, then people can go there and get a bigger picture of what's exactly there in your site. So that's a good thing to have again. And I'll repeat again, order headings properly. Write easier sentences, aim for 9th grade reading skills. Don't use Shakespearean English on your website because that's not expected. People want to understand what's written there. So try to write words which people will understand. So ensure proper punctuation. So like I said, someone might be listening to what you write. So if you miss, if you're not into the habit of putting commas and full stops, someone will listen to one big sentence without any pauses. So it's a very bad experience to have. So keep that in mind, add commas, full stops. And by the way, before comma and full stop, there is no space. It's only after that. There are many people who added before. So then look out for small spelling errors, because when you're listening to the content on a screen reader, or if you're new to the language, then you might not be able to see the difference, and you might not understand the word because some spelling is wrong, like quite and quiet. If you spell it wrong, then someone might get confused because they're new to the language. So keep those things in mind. And then this example is one of my favorites. So like I said, someone might be listening to what you write. So in French, if you have a phrase, a sentence where you have projet énorme, so if you listen to it, you think it's enormous projects, projet énorme. So, but it's very confusing in French like that. So if you make it the other way, norme et projet, then it's much more comprehensible. So avoid acronyms completely, or explain acronyms so that people can know exactly what you're talking about. And ensure meaningful and unique link text. Like I said, read more and click here or here doesn't work. So try to include the text of exactly what you're going to do when you click on the link. It gives you additional SEO points as well. And one more thing is a link with a particular text should link to a particular URL only. So if you have a word, for example, training, and it links to a page called /training, there shouldn't be another link with the text training leading to some other page, which is not good. So try to avoid those situations, which are small things which can be done. Okay, so next is the evaluation and testing. So firstly, test with keyboard only, which is quite easy to do. You just have to tab through the things and see if everything works fine. Then test alternate versions of your site. If you have 3 different versions, text only, high contrast, printable, just test them all so that you know that everything works. And then test on mobile devices, because it's RWD. You need to have responsive web design, so you need to test it on mobile and tablet. Then you can use tools like Browser Stack, which are very handy if you want to do a mobile device and other devices testing, cross-browser testing. Then test with screen reader. I tried using Chromevox. It's good, it has a bunch of shortcuts, it's quite usable. So try to use some tool like that. Chromevox being the most easy. You can just install an extension to Chrome and you can get started. And outsource testing, like if you're doing a very big project and the requirements for accessibility are really strict, you might even consider hiring somebody who will do testing for you, like an actual person with a disability who will try to use your site and tell you, like, I face these problems. So then you'll know exactly where you're going wrong. Then automated testing, like beep bop 418, I'm a teapot. That's a small wrap. So how many of you know about 418, I'm a teapot? It's like an HTTP code which was invented as an April Fool's joke. So I'm a teapot. Anyway, so here are like a bunch of tools. You can like go through the slides and see them later, but I used Site Improve myself, which is a very nice tool. It can crawl your site at regular intervals. I think by default it's weekly. You can set it up as well. And then you get to know about exactly like what, if you're adding new content, is it breaking something in your site or is it introducing new issues? So you can get a regular report about it. And then screen readers. I have not tried these myself, but I've heard, done some research. They look like they're quite reputed. And Chromevox is the one I used, which worked for me to do some basic testing. I remembered I learned some shortcuts on Windows, but then a week ago I switched to a Mac and everything changed now. So I don't know when to press Command and when to press Control. And once again, like here are the slides. If you want, you can take a picture and you can see the slides later. And if you, are you taking a picture? I have a thank you slides which says I invite questions, which is interesting. So I'll just go to that slide now. Okay? So, merci beaucoup. If you have questions, speak now or forever hold your peace. So please, questions.
You mentioned that you're putting more text in the read more links. And Drupal is controlled usually by the view mode, right? So like, how are you? It doesn't accept tokens. So how are you adding custom read more text for each link?
Okay, so I think the default read more, if I'm not wrong, the default read more that comes with the twig file that ships with Drupal 8 core has already got a title inside of their anchor tags for read more. So you only see read more, but in there's a span which has a class sr-only, which makes it screen reader only and hides the title. So in fact, the text is actually read more, about, and then the title of the node. So if you're implementing views, you might want to consider adding something similar in your views as well, so that you always have something.
This is for I guess if you're using, maybe it works for the core stuff that just comes out of the box, but for, you're saying with view modes, because I mean, Site Improve, for example, there's an open ticket on Drupal.org for this accessibility ticket, and Site Improve, for example, picks it up on every Drupal site I see. Including Drupal.org.
So the idea is to have the link text be unique, so that like people don't get confused and have them.
You would think you'd have a token, right? Like read more about X.
I don't get that point. Sorry. Can you repeat, please?
If the title, so if the read more is below something that's like, let's say it's like a news item, like Trump is crazy, read, and then the read more, and it would be like, yeah, he's really nuts, and then the read more would be like, read more about how Trump is crazy. You know what I mean? So it would reiterate the title so that you know what you're going, when you're in the screen reader, you would know what you were going to.
Okay, but usually in the screen reader, I get your point. The thing is there will be an anchor tag in the heading, and there will be an anchor tag after the preview lines that you have. So in case somebody has forgotten the heading from a few seconds ago, 40 seconds, which the screen reader took to read through the summary, then you can again listen to read more about that thing, and it helps. And also the link text is more unique, so it is in some way adds to SEO points as well, because you have the title in the anchor. So Google also, I believe, thinks that the content is on the Trump page is more related to exactly what the text inside the anchor tag is. So that way it establishes a deeper connection with like whatever content you're linking to. So out of the box, like I think the node.html.twig already has that in the anchor tag. And if you're doing views, then you can add that, like I've done it many times. You can add a token, like include the title somewhere, then you can do strip tags and put the title inside the anchor. So you get something like view more about and so on. So I've heard it's a good practice, so that's why I mentioned it.
I'll look into it. I mean, I couldn't figure out any way to do it.
Okay, I'll look into it as well. But I have done it like a couple of times, and it worked for me, with views especially. Okay, any more questions?
It's not a question actually, it's more like I went to a presentation at another convention, and it was from like a person that was like visually impaired, and she told us like the reason why she really liked having like the full title on the button is because there's some options that you can just give like from link to link. So if there was no link on your title, like you could just give the whole thing. So if it's like product and stuff, like you wouldn't read the title or like the image or the text, it's really just a button. So that way it's faster and easy.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. And one more thing is like sometimes when we have an article in a list, we tend to have like an H2 tag which has the title of the article, which has an anchor tag in there as well. Then you have the image for the article, which again has an anchor. And then you have the read more button, which again has an anchor. So when you try to tab through it, you get 3 tabs for each article. So it might make sense to like use tab index -1 or something to get a particular set of anchors out of your tab sequence to make life easier for people tabbing through the site. So that's one more point I would like to add to whatever she said. It's a good thing. Thank you for mentioning. Any other points? Yep.
Isn't it possible that you might like do something that benefits somebody with a certain disability, like a visual disability, but then that thing that you do doesn't help a person with a different disability, like maybe a cognitive disability? Like, I can't think of an example, but maybe let's just say we put something with good high contrast for a visual person. But then, let's say somebody who's autistic gets too stimulated by too many high contrast things on the page. Like, how would you balance what to do
I didn't do that.
everyone?
Oh yeah, that's a nice point. But the thing is, like, you might have to do some testing. I might need to get some like. I have never seen such a scenario, but yeah, that might happen. But you'll have to, like, on a case-to-case basis, you'll have to figure out some nice solution. There's always like since this is a very special case, I don't have anything to say about it off the top of my mind, but I'm sure like there will be, like if there are problems, there are solutions as well. So you might try Googling exactly what you are facing, and maybe you'll find an answer. So, oops. I didn't do that either. Okay. So, please, any more questions?
I just have a comment. I like that you guys included the slow internet in your list of disabilities. Not enough web developers really appreciate that one. So, yeah. I like that one. That was good.
Okay. And the main thing, like many people.
Part of accessibility is it does block access to your site, and there's a lot of sites where they're inaccessible over a slow connection because they need to load 2 megs of JavaScript to run.
Yeah. I've done that too, but now I don't. I'm clean.
It's good to not.
So. Okay, so there are like some training programs that we do at Evolving Web, like we do some online programs, and we also have on-site programs. So if anybody is interested in like a training session, be it for REST API and Drupal, or be it for something else, back-end development, front-end development, please have a word with us at the Evolving Web booth, and we will be glad to listen to what problems you're facing, and maybe leave your visiting card with us so that we can get in touch with you if you want us to get in touch with you.
You can get t-shirts if you want.
Yeah, you can get t-shirts as well. So thank you very much for being here. I'll officially stop the recording.